Hello and welcome to gaming, and my goodness, what a week it's been. When it rains, it pours in this industry. We got Bungie news, we've got Sony news, we've got Xbox news, and frankly, the Xbox news is the juiciest, so we'll just talk about that today, because we might lump the Sony Bungie news together, because that might have some knock-on effects down the road. But hey, tune in next week for that. So, what's the Xbox news? Well, you've probably been hearing about it if you've been listening to the games industry, because it's such a big thing. I honestly wouldn't be shocked if you did.
I'd be surprised.
Um, I would be, because news off the press is Phil Spencer, CEO of Xbox Games, who's been at the company since '88, started as an intern. Dude has been CEO since 2014, the PS4, or be off, goodness, Xbox 360 generation, all that stuff. He's gone. He has officially announced his retirement. Which you would think, okay, that's big news, but business as usual. But there's more. So, Sarah Bond, who some of you may know, some of you may not, she is actually president of Xbox Games. She has been basically Spencer's number two for pretty much as long as he's been around, as best I'm aware. She is also announcing that she is bowing out of the company. So, that means number one and number two are effectively out
At the same time.
at the same time. And it gets so much better, my friends. When it rains, it pours, as I do say. Because Xbox has come out, or Microsoft, I should say, has come out and said that a new CEO has already been anointed. And she is a woman by the name of Asha Shamara, I believe I'm pronouncing that right, Miss Shamara. And if you don't know who she is, that's okay. She's only been at the company since 24, and if you are already a little suspicious, let me continue that by saying she was actually, prior to this, Microsoft's head of AI development. She was the AI executive. Literally, that was her job title. So yeah, they put the AI executive in charge of the entire Xbox division. Told you it rains, it pours.
It pours.
And it pours indeed. Especially considering, by all accounts, Miss Shamara has no experience in the games industry at all. In fact, her previous work experience is actually as executives in other places. She's the former VP of product engineering over at Meta, and she's a former Instacart COO, so corporate operations officer, basically the one who kind of manages stuff. It's been a while since I've had to remind myself what a COO does, but anyways, that's her two big claims to corporate fame, I suppose. And she's a board member of Home Depot for whatever that's worth. But yeah, that's that's the new CEO, guys. Yay. I don't know. It's weird. This all feels weird because here's the thing, right? If you've been paying attention to Spencer and what he's been up to the last year or so, you actually would be probably, maybe aware of the fact that there actually was rumors back in 2016 of his potential, or 2015, excuse me, of his potential retirement. Courtesy of a leak, possibly a news person with insider information, a fellow by the name of the Ghost of Hope, who said exclusive, Phil Spencer will be retiring from his role as CEO of Microsoft Gaming after launch of the next Xbox generation. So the next consoles come out, Phil Spencer leaves. Such says the leak. However, it continues by saying that Spencer is working closely with Sarah Bond, who we previously talked about, and her team to ensure a smooth transition for her takeover as CEO. So, in other words, to boil that down, after the next Xbox came out, there were rumors that Spencer was planning to walk away from the company. I mean, like I said, he's been at the company since the 80s, and he started as an intern, so he's definitely worked his way up. And Sarah, who would then take over as basically the new head, considering she acted as number two for, as far as I'm aware, the entirety of his career. Makes sense, right? Well, Xbox did actually come back to respond to that. They did say, but according to the head of communications at the time, who was Katie Perez, she said in a statement to The Verge that apparently he isn't retiring anytime soon, they says. And who you choose to believe from here is up to you.
Yeah.
But apparently, again, there was no rumor or there was no talks of him retiring anytime soon. Again, this was back in July of 25, though. So maybe, like I said, maybe it was true. Maybe they decided to downplay it by the time being, or maybe, it is literally what it says. Technically, this didn't happen until, February end of this year, which is a year or so later. Not even. So you could interpret that as being indeed not anytime soon in relation to July 2025. However, there is the other side of that report that I did mention, where it is supposedly that Bond was listed or at least pegged to take over, which clearly did not happen. Fast forward, because now we have Miss Shamara taking over, and Bond stepping out of the company. Which feels weird, like I said, for a number one and number two to basically announce their subsequent retirements basically day of is a little weird. Maybe, again, that was the original plan for Bond to take over, but then Shamara ended up taking the position for some reason. Maybe the head of Xbox was responsible for that. I don't know. Interestingly enough, in an article from said head of Xbox, or in an article talking about him, the head actually did mention that being. Let me just find the article in my back end here. I have so many articles. That supposedly, in an email to employees, supposedly, according to a memo, CEO, goodness gracious, I'm sorry if I butcher your name here, Stea Nadella, who is the, again, CEO of Microsoft, wrote that apparently, I want to thank Phil for his extraordinary leadership and partnership, his words. Yes, here we go. Last year, Phil Spencer made the decision to retire from the company, and since then we've been talking about succession plans, said, again, CEO Stea Nadella. So according to Nadella, this was actually something that he'd been talking about with Spencer since last year, which would again line up with the article we got saying that around July, rumors started coming out that he had planned to retire after the next generation. But again, if all things were kosher, as we suspected, then by all accounts, Bond should have taken over someone else in the company. But it's instead an AI executive. So again, we come back to the question of
completely different outside the box.
yeah, someone completely different, and who by all accounts is effectively a new hire at the company. I mean, yeah, like I said, she's got some business as an executive. She was the CEO of Instacart or Meta, I can't remember which, and she worked with Meta. So she's an executive for former executive of both Meta and Instacart. So she has experience, but as again, none of them in the gaming sphere. Hell, in Microsoft herself, she was the AI executive. That was literally her job title. She was the head of core AI at Microsoft. So it's a weird decision all around. So let's kind of go into the weeds of exactly why this could be, because I've already kind of told you the details of, everything surrounding it. Let's go into the conspiracy side of things, shall we? You can imagine the internet is not pleased by this decision. Reddit is already ablaze with who is this woman and why.
Why are you here?
Why are you here?
You don't fit our way of life.
I mean, it feels very tribal in a way when you say it that way, but it does kind of, like I said, fit the mold because, again, no gaming history, yet she's the head of one of the three biggest names in gaming, so it's a little weird. So why is that? Well, you could say this, again, multiple ways of putting this here. We'll start with probably the more logical and kind of go down the more rabbit hole of conspiracy. First one could be, maybe it's a demotion, honestly. Remember, she was technically the executive of the entire AI side of Xbox, or excuse me, Microsoft, in totality for at least the last 2 years now. Yet now she's been put in charge of Xbox, which, depending on how you look at that, might be a promotion, but it also might be an executive demotion. Because remember, now she's no longer working at the parent company, she's working at a subsidiary, because remember, Xbox is technically a subsidiary, and is the CEO of that. So she's not even in the same room as, or she might not even be considered the same rank as some of the executives over at Microsoft anymore. So maybe this is a demotion. So the question then becomes, why? Well, maybe because if you've been looking at the AI business recently, it's a little shaky, to put it lightly. We covered last week the whole business with NVIDIA and their chips and everything like that, and how, again, on the surface, everything seems fine, but behind closed doors, NVIDIA themselves even kind of expressed a little worry, at least as far as their concerns with OpenAI, especially in that whole business. And AI itself seems to be a bubble that's bound to burst eventually. So maybe the Microsoft executives just said, you know what, we don't really need an AI executive anymore. We're going to pull back from that. So who knows? Maybe they kind of pushed her over to the Xbox division as a kind of soft demotion. It's possible.
It is possible that she was demoted from this.
Yeah, again, for gamers, it might seem like a dream job, but from a corporate perspective, it could be a demotion. Depending on how they have it structured as leadership-wise over at Microsoft. There is, of course, another angle to this. Possibly, I hate to say it, but there is the angle of nepotism you have to consider here. Now, I personally don't subscribe too much to this theory myself, but it has been floating around as a possible theory on things like deep Reddits and stuff like that. So I'll bring it up for the sake of uh,
Brevity.
brevity. Yeah, there's the word for it. For brevity's sake. And basically, the idea is that, again, Nadella himself is Indian, and he is the head of Xbox, or head of Microsoft, excuse me. And um, Mrs. name, who's now I suddenly can't remember.
Uh,
Weird time to have a brain fart. Gotta find it. Yes. Nadella and Miss Shimara are both Indian, as far as I can tell. I could be wrong there, in which case, please correct me. But again, considering that is the case, and as I said, Shimara is only recently a new hire as far as executives are concerned, been there since 24. Maybe it's a case of nepotism. You never know.
you never
I
know.
mean, on the top, I mean, on the topic of nepotisms, again, it's a possibility. We do know that the new head of communications over at Xbox, now that again Miss Bond is out, is going to be a fellow by the name of Matt Booty. He's been around for a little bit now, and I don't know too much about him personally speaking. But as far as I hear, from what little I've heard, again, I could be wrong here. It seems his story is kind of a case of failing upwards. So, who knows? So, like I said, there is the nepotism angle to consider here. Maybe Matt's just really friendly with the executives, and well, like I said, Shamara's Indian, CEO's Indian. I don't subscribe to that theory too much myself, but like I said,
You
for
never
the brevity.
know. Maybe they're just an insider job or something, bro.
And even if you discount and even if you discount the racial similarities, it could, like I said, just be a case of both of them are just more chummy with the CEO than Phil and Bond are. It's possible, or at the very least,
Maybe.
Bond is.
There's a possible angle to it all, and no matter what, you can't exactly discount everything.
Yeah, you can't discount everything. Like I said, that's the more conspiracy side of things. Regardless of how you slice it, like I said, this does seem to be a bit of an odd position for, like I said, Miss Bond to be put in, because by all accounts, she was lined up to be the successor for the company, at least as far as internal documents or leaks and reporting say, which again was never confirmed or denied. But the fact that, like I said, she didn't get the position, and when Phil announced his retirement, she announced her bowing out as well. Excuse me, it does feel a little weirdly timed. It does sing a little bit like someone who got passed up for the promotion that, by all accounts, was supposed to be theirs. So I'm curious to see what happens in the next few weeks, few days. I'm sure internal reports from the big outlets from gaming are already knocking on internal doors for Xbox and trying to demand explanations of, who is she, why did she get appointed, da 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 da, journalistic thoroughness and all that. As for Miss Shamara herself, despite only recently being appointed, she's actually been quite popular. Well, not popular. She's been quite active already in places like Xbox or Xbox. Can't say anything right this show. She's already been very active on Twitter X whatever you want to call it. Only being anointed as of yesterday, she already took to X as of that night, reposting to kind of fan requests and stuff on the Xbox uh, Twitter feed, I guess, talking about stuff. She even implied the possibility of bringing back the Blade dashboard, which is interesting. I don't know too much about that, but as far as I know, that's a bit of a interesting topic among the Xbox crowd. The idea of bringing back the Blade dashboard for the sake of UI's sake. Apparently, Xbox said it didn't scale well or something like that, and yet they brought it back anyway for an anniversary. And now Miss Shamara's bringing it up again. So who knows? Maybe that's where this is going. I don't know. Um, eh. Anyways, that's kind of where we are right now. Like I said, it's a bit of a weird one, like I said, because this is definitely going to be a big shakeup in the industry. Spencer, like I said, leaving was, at least been following the news reports, bound to happen within the next year or two,
Yeah,
according to
that
our
that
reports
was
today.
announced a while ago.
And again, while Xbox themselves did say he wasn't planning to leave anytime soon, in relation to when that came out compared to now, especially considering the original report did say it was going to be pegged for the release of the next consoles when he leave. He was going to leave and then he was going to release that, then leave. It does make sense, though this is a bit earlier than expected. As for Bond, however, like I said, that's where things get a little weird. Because, again, by all accounts, she, or someone else anyway, was probably going to get pegged to take over the company, and yet she didn't, and Miss Shamara instead did. Which, like I said, as we've talked about numerous times this episode, is really weird considering she has zero experience in the gaming's business, which you'd think you would probably want to put someone who at least knows gaming to head the, gaming division. But again, that's neither here nor there at this point. Talks are already beginning about the idea that the next Xbox stream we get is just going to be AI, 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 AI. So we'll see. Like I said, I'll give it the benefit of the doubt, and we'll see how things go on. But it definitely does scream of suspicious, if I'm being brutally honest with you. But again, that's kind of where we are. So let me know what you think. What do you think, Justin? What's your opinion about all this?
Something is suspicious here, and I don't like it.
Something's definitely weird
I
here,
am
yes.
conspiracy theorist.
Yeah, no, there is definitely something weird about all of this, but I'll give her
we
like
don't have the full story. That's the main thing at the end of the day. We don't have the full story on what exactly everything's going on.
And I definitely imagine that something about this is going to come out in the next few years, maybe, because this definitely feels like a little bit of a weird shakeup. I imagine people are already reaching out to Miss Bond, like I said, and asking her what happened and stuff like that. Maybe she'll say, maybe she won't. We'll see. But yeah, that's kind of this week's episode. Like I said, bunch of bad news in the gaming industry. There's this, there's the PlayStation thing, there's a whole Bungie thing we didn't even go into, but that all will be next week's episode. Because, yeah, that might have some knock-on effects for Marathon, which is coming out. But, yeah, I won't talk about that this week. So, yeah, hope you all enjoyed. Hope you all found it interesting. Let me know down in the comment section. What do you think? What do you think? Do you think Miss Shamara is going to be good? Do you think she's going to be bad? Do you think she stinks of red flags? Like, what do you think about this new appointment? And are you still confident in Xbox's future now that effectively the head of AI has been put in charge of Xbox? Or are you kind of like me and you're kind of like a we'll wait and see kind of thing? You know, cautiously optimistic, shall we say? Let me know down in the comment section. You know how it works. And
Cautiously optimistic.
cautiously optimistic indeed. And we'll see you all next week. Bye bye, everybody.
Have a good one.